The herd of enraged, panty-less women reached the naked and double quote ah. There they were exclamation point double quote give me back my lingerie exclamation point double quote take that you pervert exclamation point double quote and that exclamation point double quote Ranma took his seat, and everyone in the naked and went back to dining as if nothing had happened, while the sound of two perverts receiving divine retribution filled the air. Left square bracket later right square bracket finally, the group managed to finish their meal, and sat back talking. Inako, still in adult form, had been rather quiet, almost seeming to be in a pensive mood. Double quote lot single quote as wrong, sensei? Akane asked eventually, looking as a slight frown creased Inako's forehead. Akane didn't think that she'd ever seen her old high school teacher in a mood like this. Inako's single quote as eyes focused for a moment on Akane, then drifted back to the tabletop. It took a moment before she answered. When she spoke, her voice was a shade more husky than normal. I'm not sure. Akane double quote. She leaned back in her chair slightly, and her eyes slid up to look over Ranma and then go Sankuzi. There seemed to be a slight sheen of sweat on her face. And, now that Akane looked more closely, she seemed to be a little flushed. Ranma, looking at Inako, too, frowned. Well, sensei, maybe you should go get some sleep. It might be a fever or something. He looked over at Akane, then at their children. If it was a fever, he didn't want Miso or Miyabi to catch it. I think it's time that Miyabi was put to bed, so double quote concerned, Akane said. Hi, you should sleep sensei. Northeast, Hikaru, would ya please make sure that sensei gets home and to bed? She was a little worried about her children, herself. Although they'd already had colds and fevers, she still didn't want to go through it again. Maybe it was too late, but she had to get them home and to bed. Anyway, Sankuzi nodded and moved to let the Sodom family leave. They said their farewells, as Ranma squeezed past Inako and Sankuzi, Miso fast asleep in his arms. Akane took her daughter by the hand, and dropped some yen on the table as she passed. Miyabi toddled after her mother, covering a sleepy-yen with her other, little hand. Inako, meanwhile, was looking even a little more unwell. Double quote Inako-sen. I think we should go now. Double quote taking 1,000 yen note from his wallet, Sankuzi placed it with the rest of the money on the table. He stood up, and leaned over to help the old teacher up. As he did so, Cologne slid up behind them, ready to collect the money and wipe down the table. She frowned as she looked at Inako's condition, unstopped the young man with a light touch on his shoulder. Double quote may I be of some assistance? She motioned towards Inako. Without waiting for him to reply, Cologne sat down opposite the teacher. The Chinese woman asked Inako a series of questions, seemingly unrelated to her health, As she reached over the table to touch various Soun and red key levels. As she studied the teacher, she frowned slightly, her eyes narrowing as she thought. She couldn't recall anything quite like this before, but she'd heard various tales and legends, as well as a more recent story, maybe only about 10 years ago. Sucking up energy for a person's own use was usually alright. People could change energy into usable forms of ki before releasing the power in various ways, anything from ki blasts to healing ki. Cologne's grandmother had on her. Cologne looked over at the girl. Less than Hinako. Oh, seems to have been attuned for only one type of ki fighting energy by that silly technique that Apple's eyes had used. She can't absorb any other type of ki if she expects to let it be released in a normal manner. The ki will end up controlling her instead of the other way around. She'll have to wait until the ki dissipates. With the amount of perversion she has taken into herself, I don't think that even 100 different versions of the Hapacoin exchange style blast would turn her back to normal. And if she tried, the perversion would sink into others. We must avoid that at all costs! Greater than Cologne frowned as she thought. Less than the last time that Hinako had taken in another form of ki, she'd changed. She'd sucked into herself all of the hatred that students over the years had focused on that ugly statue of Idioku no Kauchao. And that hatred had controlled her, turning her into delinquent! Greater than Cologne! As eyes widened and she stopped the examination. This is no good. Not very good at all. Hinako-sensei seems to have drawn into herself an evil, destructive power. She's filled with rappi and lucky Santaki! Handa. Gosenkuzi gulped and stared at Hinako, who, by now, was beyond listening to the conversation. Her eyes were glazed over, her skin turning deep pink. A light sheen of sweat was slowly dripping down her forehead as she seemed to struggle for breath. Yes, I'm afraid that the ki will take hold of her and she'll run riot. Book knows what she'll do, but we must assume the worst. She's in no state to be left alone, and I don't think that it's the best idea to let her to closet people until her ki is released. Remember, this isn't Hinako. She is no byproduct of Rappel's eyes lust. Being Cologne's customer, and since she'd asked if she could help, Cologne was obligated to follow through with her offer until Hinako was back to normal. Her honor bound her to look after the girl, even if it meant keeping her away from every man in Mirima. But there was something between Gosenkuzi and Hinako, though Cologne wasn't really sure what. He obviously liked the girl, and Hinako was friendly towards him. She couldn't keep Gosenkuzi away from Hinako all of the time. She could only hope that he wouldn't try to take advantage of the sick teacher. Less than after all, he could be useful. Greater than I believe that the best way to cure her, the fastest way, is to talk her to Juzenkai and dip her into the spring of ground saint. That should wipe away any lust from her body and return her to her original state, and underneath her breath, she muttered in Chinese, "I hope Go Sunkuzi started, China. But she's got classes. How can she?" That trailed off as he looked at Inako. The sight of her in such obvious distress upset him. He sighed. "I'll arrange a substitute for her. We leave tomorrow morning. I shall try a few key drainage techniques overnight, but I'm not sure if they will work. So, I shall be preparing for a trip to China. I guess you can come, but Inako will be sleeping here tonight. Just be here at sunrise, or we'll leave without you." Without saying Kano for word, Cologne stood up, helped up the teacher, and led her off through the kitchen. Go-Sunkuzi stared after the two young women, a stunned look on his face. Left square bracket morning, right square bracket Cologne, and a very young Hinako headed up the Nirima road with Go-Sunkuji trailing behind, carrying a rather heavy backpack obviously loaded with all of their travel gear. Go-Sunkuzi chatted quietly with Cologne, the woman relating the failure of various techniques that they'd tried. Each time Cologne had attempted to drain Hinako's ki, she herself could feel the horrible energy trying to soak into her. I need both happy and lucky here to divert the ki back into them. I even no seen hide nor hair of them since the girls beat them up." She sighed. The drainage techniques were not safe at all. Without them, you'll even know just one hand the girl running around, but two, terrorizing Nirima. I don't want that happening, especially since one of those two would be me. The best that I could do was to help her return to her child state. Go-Sunkuzi nodded, staggering under the load. He looked over at Chibai Hinako as she happily went along. Northeast. "Look what I have," squealed Hinako as she bounced along the road in a cute little girlish way, waving a piece of paper in the air. "Butterfly!" Glancing at the paper, Cologne snorted. "That's not a butterfly. That's what got you into the trouble in the first place. That breast print that stupid apples I lusts after." She turned back to walk along, and suddenly stopped in shock. Two hands were squeezing her breasts from behind! Wait. Maybe it's your breast prints, because they're too small to be mine, when I'm grown up. Little Hinako let go and danced ahead. "I'm just so sexy that everyone would love to have a print of my breasts. I'm just too sexy." She skipped off, giggling as she patted various guys' rears and even flipping up women's skirts. Yeah! Pervert! "Hey! What you doing?" Both Go-Sunkuzi and Cologne stared after her, their mouths hanging open. Kami-sama, She's an even worse version of a child at bullseye exclamation point double quote left square bracket tendu hyphen k. Nirima right square bracket Akane hummed as she hung out the washing. Miyabi played happily by her feet, acting out some kempo moves that her father had taught her recently. Smiling at her daughter, Akane could see just how proud the little girl was of her accomplishments. She wouldn't let Ranma train Miyabi seriously yet, but she was happy to see how their daughter loved martial arts. Miso was inside, sleeping. Nodoka was looking after him for a while, so that Akane had a little free time with Miyabi. The little girl was still jealous of her brother, but she was getting used to him, especially now that Miso could crawl. Miyabi found that she could play with him exclamation point. The sounds of Ranma practicing came from the dojo. All in all, it was a heat day. Shading her eyes, Akane looked up into the bright, summer sky. Gosankuji, Hinako and Cologne were leaving for China. She'd heard that they'd planned to go to Jizenkaiju. Of all places exclamation point less than why does that place hold such an attraction for everyone? Ranma, Shampoo and Mousse were all cursed due to those pools exclamation point greater than Akane thought hotly. Less than the only thing that stopped Ranma from joining the trip to Jizenkaiju had been Kawaii. She absolutely refused to let Ranma join them. I wonder why. But at the car Ranma just went to sulk in silence in the dojo. Males exclamation point greater than Akane sighed and turned back to the washing line and her chores. As she worked, a smile spread across her lips. Less than hopefully someone will remember to bring back some nani icon for Ranma. Greater than left square bracket mid ocean right square bracket Hinako hyphen ko slept soundly on the deck, lying on a beach towel. She was wearing a bathing suit, looking very cute and innocent. But what a terror she had been while she had been awake. Even worse than a child who'd just found out the differences between men and women, plying its parents with questions of a nature that they'd rather not answer. But Hinako had been 100 times worse than any child exclamation point. Gosankuji dozed next to her, the sun slightly coloring his unusually pale features. He still had the family trait of dark smudges under his eyes, but the light seemed to lessen them. In face, he actually looked like a normal boy. All of his creepiness and strangeness had disappeared while he slept. Cologne gave a sigh and wondered what she'd do. The adult Hinako was pretty easy to deal with, compared to the child. Throwing a bucket of water over the woman did the trick, but the child, Cologne's daughter, her granddaughter and even Shampoo had never been this bad, even put together. At least when they got to the mainland, there wouldn't be anyone to worry about. Just themselves. Left square bracket tendu hyphen k. Evening right square bracket clad only in a towel. Akane flipped the bathroom door sign around to show that the room was occupied. After shutting the door behind her, she walked through the changing room area, leaving her night clothing in the basket washing machine. Entering the bathroom, she found Ranma by the bath, a towel wrapped around his waist. The dampness clinging to his body showed that he'd just finished Eddie's bath and was about to leave. The cop, you didn't flip over the sign again, Akane said, a hand on her hip, lot if someone walked in ? Lot, like you did on me that first time we met. Ranma smirked at her, and you were looking at me, and Akane avoided the subject, but it's still different when a girl sees a boy. She threw some soap at him for good measure, which he easily dodged. It bounced off of the bath and skidded to a halt in the mid-loft white-tiled floor. Ranma just smiled, ignoring her attack. Speaking of Ranma, did you hear about Hinako-sensei ? Yes, it's very strange. She's obviously better. Oh. And none of the children have got her illness. Thank goodness. Ranma nodded and frowned thoughtfully. I wonder what's gotten into her, Akane shrugged and stepped past him to pick up the soap. It scooted out off her hands, and shot out over the floor. Ranma watched as she bent down to pick it up again, eyeing the hem of the towel as she bent over. His head mirrored her long legs and cute rear. He felt a sudden need sweep over him, and his body reacted to her in the normal way. He stepped up behind her as he stood back up, holding the soap in triumph. The soap fell to the ground as she stared up into his eyes. The couple met in a passionate kiss, her arms wrapping around his neck as she pulled off her towel, dropping it in a fluffy pile at her feet. Akane rubbed her body against him as they kissed with a fiery passion, her fingers stroking his hair and pigtail. Ranma pulled off his own towel and threw it to the floor. He caressed his wife's sides for a moment before starting to grind his hips against hers. Pulling back from their kisses, he stared into her eyes for a moment, then with a small smile, he dipped his head as he said, "You have such beautiful breasts." As she whispered, "Oh, Ranma," she felt his head move down and his lips find her hardened nipples. Suckling, Ranma listened to Akane's moans of pleasure coming closer as she bent forwards to nibble at his ear. A shiver ran through his body, and a groan escaped his lips. Switching to her other nipple, Ranma felt Akane's shudder, and her arms tighten around him. Too soon for Akane, he stopped and ran a finger lightly across her jaw. He looked into her eyes, a need shining there. "Would you? Just a little?" he asked softly, and his fingers traced down towards on her shoulder. Giving a small nod and a smile, Akane knelt down before her husband, and let him guide her face down to his manhood. She wrapped her warm lips around his erect length, and her hands moved to caress his buttocks. Ranma groaned with pleasure at the warm wetness that surrounded him in such an intimate way, and his eyes watched as she started to bob her head. He felt so wonderful as she took him as far as she could into her mouth and bobbed back and forwards again, but he wanted something else. With effort, head pulled back and out of her sweet mouth, guiding her back to her feet. He felt her hand lightly stroke his length, and he knew that he'd go crazy without making love to her. That light shining in her eyes showed her need for him, much more clearly than words. As they kissed again, Ranma picked her up in his strong arms. She held onto him tightly, her breasts pressing against his chest. She wrapped her legs around him, pressing her whole self against him. He could feel her weakness against his groin, the tip of his manhood pressing against her plug-like hair. Carrying her, he opened the bathroom door and went into the change rooms. Her light body feeling wonderfully soft in his arms. He glanced quickly around the room. The washing machine was the exact height that he required. He placed her down on the top of the machine, where she let go of his hot, damp body. Leaning back, her legs parted wide for him, she looked up at him through her lashes, giving him a sultry gaze. Trembling slightly, Ranma slipped a finger between her petals and parted her womanhood. He looked at her open flower before him for a moment before he pushed himself a little way into her. With a slight thrust of his hips, he parted her, driving his hardness deep into her tight opening. They both groaned with the feelings of pleasure. Akane hands holding tightly onto the edges of the washing machine as she reached up to meet him. Akane's eyes watched her husband's face, knowing that her own mirrored his ecstasy. Their eyes met, and they held each other's gaze as they moved together in a passionate dance of lust and need. Over and over again their bodies met, the washing machine thumping rhythmically against the wall to their coupling. The intensity of their love-making grew stronger as the two moved with their grinding, hot bodies. Nothing mattered anymore to them, other than the feelings that flooded their minds. They were one, a trembling, passionate whole, needing release yet savoring each and every sexual, wonderful sensation that their motions gave them. It seemed forever to the couple as Ranma filled Akane with his Isoko, again and again, deep into her accepting, hot and wet womanhood. He felt hair tightness gripping him as he entered her again and again, feeling her flex around him the deeper he pushed. To Akane, Ranma's thrusts brought a deep pleasure racing through her body, one that was almost too powerful for her to handle. Akane's fingertips gripped the washing machine's edges even tighter as she struggled to hold on, lost in their passion. Her eyes, half closed, watched Ranma's face through her long lashes. His face showed a mixture of pleasure and pain as he thought to hold back, his hips pounding harder against hers as he drove himself deeper into her body. Akane's own face was flushed a deep pink and her lips formed his name as she moved against him, needing him to fill her. Then she let go, and felt herself fall over the edge. Pure pleasure filled her, and she quivered with release. Ranma felt her inside valve spasming around his hard member. His hands gripped her hips and pulled her hard to him as she orgasmed. Deep inside her, his manhood swelled to release his seed. He held her tightly to him as he came. NNGH. The pair were locked together for a timeless moment, till the afterglow spread through both of their bodies, making them relax and seem to float on a wave of delicious contentment. Slowly, Ranma leaned against her, relaxing. Akane's arm slipped around him and they held each other, panting softly. With a loving kiss on his cheek, Akane whispered, "I think it's time for a bath now. Let's clean up and relax. We need." Ranma sighed regretfully, realizing how uncomfortable she must be, on the washing machine, and slowly pulled out of her. She moaned softly as he slid out of her still sensitive opening, and shivered. Ranma gave her a soft kiss, and helped her up. They headed back into the bathroom to wash each other, and then to bathe. As they held each other in the bath, Akane rested her head on Ranma's shoulder. She smiled. "I wonder if Gosunkuji and Inako-sensei haven't got as much fun as us. Kissing her hair, Ranma whispered, knowing Gosunkuji. "I doubt that very much." Left square bracket near Juzenkaiju. China right square bracket Gosunkuji-chan. "Do a Mr. Elephant for me. I wanna see a Mr. Elephant!" Inako tugged at the man's sleeve as she squealed. He had a very hard time of blushing. All he could do was walk, head down, trying to ignore her. It was even more difficult to do so while Cologne was laughing at him. Less than will ever have any respect from anyone. Even now I know magic ? Greater than he thought of himself as he trudged on. Suddenly a very burly man, make that woman, blocked his path. She lost twice his height and width, and dressed in Amazon warrior-style Chinese silks. She had the biggest muscles he'd ever seen! A jumble of strange sounds poured from her lips as she slid her sword out off its scabbard. More almost lyrical sounds followed, if lyrical in a harsh way, and the large woman glared at the party. Cologne spoke back in the same language, moving to stand in front of Jeopardy. The big Amazon narrowed her eyes, spoke a garbled screech of sounds, then called out. Turning back to the other two, Cologne shook her head slowly. "It seems that my actions towards the younger ones in Miram are still held against me. She won't listen to me about what happened, and won't trust either of you, as you're both with me. I'm going to have to fight." She stood tall, chin raised, glaring at the Amazon, and waited. Before too long, the forests surrounding them filled, one by one, with Jotsuzoku women. They were all armed, and all of them glared at Cologne. One stepped forward. She looked quite pretty. Her long dark hair swept back into a ponytail. Her whole manner and bearing said that she was the leader of these women. She sized up the three in the middle, then addressed Kawaii in Japanese. "What are you doing here? You have been stripped of fire tight and cast out of this place. You know the penalty for returning after such a disgrace. You lower our honor by just being here. Prepare to fight me, dishonorable one!" Without giving Cologne a chance to respond, the leader rushed at her, a Chinese war cry bursting from her lips. Cologne wasted no breath. Coming up from a crouched combat stance, she struck at the woman, at the last moment, with a lightning-fast kick. Shine pulled her foot in the leader's stomach, sending her crashing back down to the ground. The downed woman growled up at the ex-Amazon, unfazed. She pushed up onto her feet and prepared to launch herself at Cologne again. As he did so, she cried out in Chinese, and the other Amazons sprang into Tian, heading for the party with weapons drawn. Suddenly one warrior woman screamed and dropped her weapon. Then another, and another, and another. It seemed that almost every girl was clutching of her chest, a look of shock on each face. The Gosunkuji saw what was happening. Two small blurs bounced from breast to breast, and cries of "Sweeto! Let me hug you! Oh, and you! And you!" Could be heard. Kapo's eye and Rakayu's eyes. For the first time in his life, Gosunkuji was glad to see them. The Amazons had now stopped their attack, and were in an all-out chase to catch the two, and Hinako-ko searched her pockets for a moment, then her small voice called out, "Ooh! Those two bad men must be punished." Kapow Gojo and Satsu. A strong beam of light zapped out from the 50-yen coin, and into the crowd. Only Gosunkuji and Cologne realized their danger and ducked out of the way in time. Hinako spun around, quickly draining the fighting ki of the Amazons and Tatuanda. As she spun, each and every one fell to her power, and Hinako began to change. She grew taller, her body rounding out into a sexy figure, her dress stretching tightly over her form, almost to the point of bursting. When she put the coin away, she slid a hand along her inside thigh, and licked her lips slowly. Such children! They will never beat me. She tossed her head and walked down the path. Cologne frowned, but followed on after her. I wonder what those two were after. They wouldn't follow us to China without a reason, would they? Maybe they're after the print that Hinako has. Gosunkuji suggested. Maybe. After a few moments, the two caught up with Hinako. She leaned against Atari, her hands sliding up and down her sides and hips. A soft moaning sound escaped her lips, and every so often a hand moved to caress her own breast or slide down between her thighs, before stopping to stroke her sides again. Her eyes opened a slit and she looked at the other two. Her I can't go on. She moaned softly and arched her back, trying her best not to touch herself. Please get the water. Cologne S jaw tightened. They were so close. She couldn't send Gosunkuji to get the water. He didn't know where it was. She couldn't protect Hinako! Gosunkuji would have to. She looked at him for a moment. Whatever happened would either break the poor boy's friendship with Hinako, or... But maybe he was strong enough. There was nothing else she could do. Now, I'll dodge the water. Gosunkuji, look after her. With that, she turned and ran off toward Jizenkayu. As soon as Cologne left, Hinako sank to the ground and groaned, both of her hands running up and down her inner thighs. She reached the hem of her dress, and started to lift it up over her hips, but she looked up at the man with large, dark eyes. "I'm sorry." Goju-chan. I need. No, comma, please. Please go away. She ran her trembling hands back down her thighs, an obvious struggle showing clearly in her pretty face. Double quoting Nako-san. I can't leave you. What if someone comes and hurts you? He looked down the trail where Cologne had disappeared, hoping that she would suddenly come back. Him? Protect someone? Not even his magic could protect him. He could hardly remember the Shinto spells, let alone try to perform them. The girl shivered even more violently as a soft moan escaped her lips as he began to lose the fight with herself. Please, please leave me. I just can't let you see me like. Her voice trailed off as her fingers slid slowly towards the hem of her skirt again. Gosankuzi could hardly help but stare at her, her thighs pressed tight like a jetter, her trembling form as she struggled to do what? He stared at her and he realized what she was going to do. A sudden rush of blood raced to his head, and he felt a small drop of blood drip out of his nose. Double quote Goju-chan. She looked up at him, a shyness wrestling with a need and lust in her eyes. I need you. She whispered the last so softly that he almost couldn't hear it. With an enticing slowness, she fingered her dress before reaching down and lifting it. Her smooth motions became more urgent as she started to yank the dress up, her body wriggling with desire. Gosankuzi's eyes nearly popped out of his skull as he saw her small, lacy panties. He almost fainted when Hinako's dress was tucked over her head and her full, rounded breasts popped into view. The discarded dress fell to the ground, and she reached down to start wriggling out of her panties. Oh, Goju-chan, I can't. Oh, I couldn't do this with you. Her voice was a series of gasps as the passion held her in a strong, binding grip. Controlling her. Gosankuzi single quote's eyes almost popped out of his head as his blood rushed to his manhood. Hinako-san exclamation point double quote watching as she kicked off her panties and reached between her legs to her most private place. Gosankuzi sank to his knees in wonder and more than a little shame. This was the first ever woman he'd seen naked, in the flesh. She seemed perfect to him, even the way she moved to touch herself. Ever so often her slim fingers darting away to grip her thighs to stop herself. Gosankuzi gulped, his mouth dry. She was still struggling with herself. He is showing some fear behind the lust as she tried to avoid looking at them. The worst part for Gosankuzi was that whenever she arched up, trying to drag her hands away from herself, her pretty pink petals were displayed to him in all their glory. She was so beautiful exclamation point double quote. Oh, help me. I can't do it myself. Hinako's breath came in gasps as she writhed on the thick grass, under the tree. Her body glistened with sweat in the sunlight that streamed through the trees. A hand moved to cross over her breasts, the other between her legs as she looked at him. Her innocence and her desperation so plainly visible to Gosankuzi. Make love to me. Double quote I can't. He was in turmoil inside, desperately needing her, wanting to be her, and wanting to protect her from wolves like himself. He was no better than anyone, he'd just take advantage of her! With a cry she moaned, "Please!" The sound of her pleading was just too much for him. "Go-sankuji," whispered, "Please forgive me, Hinako-san." As he stripped down, out of his pants, he crawled over the grass to her. He felt guilty, so very guilty, but he couldn't help himself. As he neared her, she reared up her hips and her scent washed over him. Just one taste of a woman. He leaned down and his fingertip lightly ran over her pretty pinkness. His mouth soon followed and he tasted his first woman. He opened his mouth and let his tongue dart over her slit, her honey, so silky against his mouth, coated his tongue. Hinako was so sensitive, her body so in need, that she cried out, pushing herself up to him for more. She'd never felt like this before, never. Her whole life, she'd been like a child, never adult long enough for any off-bias type of pleasure. A hoarse whisper came out of her mouth. "Please, Hikaru-chan." Intoxicated by her scent and taste, Go-sankuji lost all sense of himself, and could only obey her. His hand slid to his underpants and he pulled them off. His hard manhood finally escaping from its confines. He looked down at her, so open and needful of him. And then he moved down to her. Not really knowing what to do, he stared down at her, a little helpless. She was so pretty. Her long dark hair spread out in a fan over the grass. Her soft breasts rising and falling as she waited for him, trying so hard to stay still. He paused too long, and her hips raised to push up against his, showing her a want. Go-sankuji breathed in slowly, then looked down. He guided himself, hesitantly, to her opening. As he looked into her face, he started to push past those pink petals, to find his way inside her. She was so tight. Go-sankuji pushed his hips down towards hers, but her virgin walls held on to him. Pushing down a little more, he looked into her face as she gave a moan. There was a look, a frightened look in her eyes. He'd assumed, long ago, that such a wonderful woman would have been knowing in the arts of love, as it were. That look changed his mind. He didn't really know what it was like to make love to a woman, but it lost that look. She was a virgin, just like him. He backed off a little, and looked down at her. The look disappeared, replaced by pleading and longing. He couldn't resist. Hinako shivered as she felt his manhood probing to get through, into her body. Her inner walls were stretching, the wetness helping to open her up to him. But, it hurt. Every time he prodded inside her, she opened up just a little more. The pain was like an ache where his seemingly giant length parted her. She shivered and gave a soft moan, needing him even more than she cared about that feeling. Hurry, Hikaru-chan, she groaned. Just push. Hard. Already slightly inside her, Go-sankuji bit his lip, and thrust. His eyes opened wide as he broke her virgin barrier, pushing her inner walls wide to accommodate him. She stifled a cry of pain, leaning herself up to him instead. John T stop. She shuddered and her arms wrapped around his waist, to pull him on top of her. Hikaru-chan, don't ever stop. The two started to move, their bodies joining. Hinako's pain was soon forgotten in the pleasure as they moved in the grass. Hinako had long ago been hovering at the edge of orgasm, her body out of control with all the crazy hormones that the kid had caused to change. She was ready almost as soon as the two had begun. Gosenkuzi held her tightly, knowing that there was no way that he could hold on any longer. A real woman. This was so different from anything else he'd ever felt before, and so incredible that he knew that he wouldn't last. But the way he felt, the way she felt, neither could do anything else but bring themselves right to the edge. And Gosenkuzi came, his warm seed spreading out through her body. Her own response was as powerful as his, and both of their bodies shuddered with release in each other's arms, both giving themselves to each other, riding in the waves of pleasure together. To soon, drained by all she'd experienced during the last few days, Hinako fell into a sound sleep. Gosenkuzi lay in her arms and thought off sleep. He was tired, but as he looked at her, he suddenly was weighed down by guilt. She looked so pure and sweet as she slept. So innocent. And he'd just taken her, so later. Let his body control him. That wasn't right. He'd known about her state, yet he'd still done it. He fixed his clothing, whispering Kami-sama, I'm the most worthless man alive. He hated himself. That was a pretty normal state of affairs for the young man, but he'd never felt his own hatred so much before. With trembling hands, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a blanket. Gently, her offered the naked woman. He turned away, feeling too guilty to even look at her, and started offering sticks to build a small fire. She'd need warmth and maybe some tea, and he hoped that Hinako would forgive him. One day, as the fire crackled cheerfully, as if to mock his dark feelings, the young man watched as his effort played around the flowers in the clearing. A strong, chilling gust sent a shiver through him, and the petals of the pretty, delicate flowers were scattered to the winds. His only friend. And he'd ruined it. Left square bracket nearby right square bracket Gosenkuzi A sleepy mind seemed to create the illusion of two sets of eyes peering through the bushes at him. Drowsy, filled with guilt, he thought seemed to be the eyes that glared at him, seeing his dirtiness had lodged onto the poor Hinako. He ignored them, glancing down at the sleeping Hinako, curled up under her blanket. But the eyes were real. Got the print, I'm sure of it. Kappa's I whispered softly, I've seen the girl with it. Now looks like a good time to get it back. Rakai's I nodded in agreement, and a good time to teach her a lesson for helping Ranma in a fight. Appa's I nodded, and when we get the print, we can go back and prove to Ranma that it is his breast prints, like you said. I'll glomp onto her chest while you stop the boys. Let's go! Exclamation point, double quote. The two agilely leaped out of the bushes towards the pair, but a dark shape suddenly dropped from the trees in front of them. Happy and Lucky both pulled up sharply. The thing. No, it was a man at all. Pisana-looking Chinese man stood in their path. His dark hair curled in slight ringlets near his ears, giving him a slightly pretty boy look, as did his gold earring. He had an elegant build, with smooth muscles and a deep chest. His wide shoulders spoke of power and strength. He wore dragon-scale armor for a top, and matching bracers around his wrists. Long white pants, tied off at the ankles, covered his muscular legs. The only odd thing about his outfit was the pair of pantyhose, tied around his waist. Gosanku's single quote, his eyes widened as his sluggish mind tried to struggle with images it saw before it. A snarl marked his features. Happy's eyes. Old man, give me a new name or it'll be due to death! Exclamation point, double quote. Happy blinked up at the man. Pardon? Why? What is your name? And why should I give you one? Question mark, double quote. The old man was still under the influence of the forgetfulness potion. He had no idea who the younger man was, but the words seemed to enrage them, and Happy's eyes, and the unlucky Rakayu's eyes, were both picked up and shaken. You know who I am. You were the one who gave me my horrible name. The customs of my people, only you can rename me. Give me a new name, or kill you and your friend. I will no longer tolerate being an AMEDPANSUDODAROU! Exclamation point, double quote. This, Happy and Lucky both broke into laughs. Being named after pantyhose, Happy managed between giggles. What a name! Exclamation point, double quote. With a growl, Taru threw them both to the ground. He pulled a bucket of water from nowhere, and dumped the contents over himself. The man changed. No longer a man, he was a gigantic creature, a terrible mix of animals. He looked somewhat like a minotaur, but multiple tentacles protruded from his back. His tail was like a serpent, but the most amazing thing was his giant wings. Gosankuji, now wide awake with shock, stared at the creature, who had so suddenly appeared before him. It snorted and pounced on its tormentors, smashing them both with its large fists. The two went flying into a tree, narrowly missing Gosankuji's head. He yelped as the monster's tentacles reached out and grabbed the pair of hands, smacking them together soundly. A hollow thunk reverberated around the clearing, and the two went silent. The Minotaur gave a low growl and spread his mighty wings, and with a leap into the air he took off. As the downdraft from the monster's wings shot sparks from the campfire into the air, Gosankuji shivered in terror, staring up at the great monster above the clearing. As Gosankuji watched with large, scared eyes, the monster threw Happy and Lucky as hard as it could. Off into the distance. The pair dwindled to a little dot in the distance before disappearing completely. Seemingly satisfied, Taru landed in the clearing. Taking the kettle pot had been set to boil for Gosankuji's tea, Taru poured in on himself, turning him back into a rather wet and naked man. Picking up the remains of his pants, Taru put them on, then turned to Gosenkuji. What is up with you and the girl there? Why was the pervert chasing you? Gosenkuji just stared up at Taru. He was so nervous that he could hardly think, let alone speak. He stared up at the Chinese man, his mouth working soundlessly. Taru's face became threatening as he glared down at the towering man. Tell me what you've got to do with the old man! I was all that Gosenkuji managed to whimper. The taller man bent down and grabbed Gosenkuji by the collar of his shirt, and picked him up, shaking him slightly. Tell me, you little coward! Taru said in a low growl. Less than if I can find why the pervert's following, maybe I'll find a way to get him to change my name, since he'll probably beef to this geek again. Next time I see the bastard! Greater than H. Hi. I'll tell! Taru sneered and dropped him back on the ground. Shivering with relief, Gosenkuji gave a small sigh. That was almost a sob. He stared intently at the ground and started to relate the story sketchily, in a shaky voice. Taru sat by the fire, a thoughtful look coming over his features as he listened to Gosenkuji's tale. He stared into the dancing flames of the campfire, and he started to speak, as if to himself. My life was ruined, all because of that old pervert, and that accursed name he gave me at my birth. I never had a girlfriend before, either, all because of him. Taru's gaze turned into a glare, a frown crossing his features. Every time I've met a girl who likes me, she's asked my name. How can I tell her, when she'll just laugh at me? Everyone does. The only girl who I've said more than 2 sentences to is a stupid girl called Rouge. And that's because we fight. She hates me and I hate her. I didn't really care about an Akane girl, either, but she was Ranma's, anyway. I've never even had anything like that friendship with you and the sleeping teacher there. Ashi's voice started to raise. He turned to Gosenkuji and glared over at him, making him jump as Taru noticed him at last. At least you had that! Gosenkuji lowered his eyes with shame. Not anymore! She sure to hate me now. Gosenkuji sighed. He needed to get this off his chest before the guilt tore him apart. Taru really didn't care one way or another about what he'd done, so why not talk to the stranger? We are very much alike, when it comes to girls, he continued, but it's not an aim that drives girls away. It's just me. Taru looked speculatively over at Inako, and shrugged. You said that Shayla's the one asking you, so you'll just have to wait and see, won't you? Who thought about that cologne woman question mark double quote she single quote s off to get the spring of ground saint water to help restore sensei back to normal double quote that spring. I know where that's supposed to be. Right next to the spring of ground twins. The woman might be able to get at Bowser to remember what evil he did to me, and to get him to give me a new name. She knows him from old times, does she not question mark double quote Gosunkuji just nodded his head. I guess so double quote well, you look after your teacher, and I will head to Jizenkaiju. I'll save some of that water for the old bastard when I see him, too. Then he's sure to give me a new name. Taro laughed maniacally, and with a flick of the wrist, threw a bucket of cold water over himself. Taro-Minotaur flew off into the sky, leaving Gosunkuji alone to his thoughts with the sleeping, satiated Inako. Left square bracket near Jizenkaiju right square bracket Taru flew through the air towards Jizenkaiju. Looking down, Hera watched a number of villagers dragging a woman with a jar away from the springs. She was struggling, but to no avail as one of the most ugly and strongest women that he'd ever seen held the woman in an inescapable grip. Less than well, it isn't me problem. Greater than he turned back to the lakes, no longer giving the villagers any thought. Less than I have to get the water exclamation point greater than the Jizenkaiju guide was nowhere to be seen. Less than them. It's been a long time since I was here last. The lakes all looked the same from this height exclamation point greater than he flew down for a landing by the pools of cursed water. He'd definitely lost his bearings. The struggling woman with the jar caught his eye again. He gave a frown, and wondered if he should help. Less than she single quote will probably just ask for his name at the end and laugh at me, greater than he thought sourly. He went to turn back to the pools when his sharp eyes caught the kanji on the jar. Shananiak on the spring of ground saint. He gave a snort, and started to take off. From the air, he'd follow those women. When they got to wherever they were going, he'd take the jar and go find that Bowser. He looked at the captured woman from afar. Long dark hair, an obviously pretty body and face, even from that distance. Maybe he'd rescue her from her fate. To left square bracket flashback right square bracket Cologne had been kneeling by the pond, filling her jar when the villagers pounced. She could have fought them off and got away, but she didn't want to take the risk of spilling the water, just yet. They'd knocked out the Jizenkai out wide, and even though she was sure to find the right spring, she just didn't want to take the chance. Another woman, one of the healers of the clan, had been present. Cologne, though you had dishonored, the elders had decided to give you a chance to explain yourself. The clan leader had snorted in disgust, slamming her sword back into its scabbard. Most of the warriors were hot-headed, but she was obviously the worst of the lot. The healer ignored the warrior, and looked to Cologne for her answer. Slowly, Cologne nodded. The elders had wisdom where the clan leader was brash and headstrong. This is the only reason that stopped Cologne from putting up a fight, and getting back to the others with the spring water. She let the warriors hag dragged her back to the village, where the remaining elders studied her. Some she knew from many years ago. Some were drawn into the positions, and some familiar faces were gone. An interview with Cologne had ensued, and she'd been allowed to tell her side of the story. Cologne explained of her madness, of the little she remembered of her time of forgetfulness, and of her final cure. She admitted her guilt, and did not excuse herself of her attacks on the Nirima people at the wedding, nor of the way she tried to trap and murder the Sodom family and their friends. The Amazonian elders had listened without speaking, letting her tale unfold. When she had concluded, Cologne had thrown herself on the mercy of the elders of the village. It was her right to be tried by them, now that she was in the village. The old women had talked among themselves, letting Cologne wait and wonder. But Cologne was sure that the reply would be to her advantage. There was no reason why she didn't leave, if she didn't believe it to be so. The pronouncement finally came. Cologne would become the servant of the clan leader for a moon, where she should have to do menial chores for not only the leader, but for the whole clan. After that, if Cologne performed her job with honor, she would be restored to her former position as a lady of the Jotsuzoku, and elder. Humility. That single quote is what Cologne needed to learn. Left square bracket and flashback right square bracket. Cologne looked out of the window of the beautiful, old Chinese-style house that she was locked in. She remembered this place from so long ago, back when she was living in the village. It had been crafted so long ago, back when her late husband had been alive. He'd been a wonderful carpenter, and had done most of the work on the houses in the village. Traditionally, the women were the ones who planned the houses, and the men did the back-breaking work of building them. So, the ancient Amazon architectural style had been preserved through the years. This was one of the houses that he had built from scratch. Cologne smiled to herself and went to sit down on the polished wooden floor. The woodwork was so fine, and so carefully and lovingly preserved for the years. The deep grain of the wood came through clearly, even through the small marks and scratches here and there. She looked to the door, which opened onto the village square. Two bulky woman warriors stood guard. It was good to be back in the village again, even under such circumstances. But the longer the elders were working over terms with the rest of the clan, Cologne started to chafe at how long the meeting was taking. She narrowed her eyes slightly, and shook her head slowly. If the meeting did not finish soon, she would have to break her way out and get the jar of water to Hinako. A nagging worry was at the back of her mind. She was not sure if she should have left Gosunkuji alone with the teacher. But there was no use worrying now. Suddenly, a rumbling sound from the roof above Cologne's head broke the silence. A powerful wind blew through the open windows, and the guards outside had turned around and were staring up in horror at something. The rumbling grew louder, and the ceiling started to crack. The cracks spread on, grew larger, and pieces of wood started to rain down inside the room. Around Cologne. With a graceful leap, Cologne pushed herself back away from the center-off room, and took cover by the wall. With a sudden crack the roof was smashed in, and a giant, furred arm reached in. It made a wild swing around the room, searching, and finally grabbed Cologne by the waist. She didn't dignify screaming, but looked up through the roof to the creature who wanted the arm with wide eyes. She was lifted up into the air, only just managing to grab hold of the jar of cursed water as she was roughly yanked up into midair. An image went through her mind of the precious jar tumbling to the ground where it smashed, the water, splashing out in droplets like a rainbow, finally spreading out over the wooden floor and dissipating, lost forever. She clutched the jar to her breasts, and turned to glare up at the monster, more angry than anything at how she had almost lost the water. Less than can pseudo Taro! Greater than she thought to herself. Less than that young man has it coming to him. But it does give me an excuse for an escape, if only for a little while. Greater than Taro didn't see her glare. Less than now to go back to Gosankuji's camp, turn human, get the water off of the woman, turn back, fly off and find Appao's eyes, dunk the old man with the water, and finally get a new name! The day I have been waiting for, my whole life, is almost here! Greater than not even bothering to look at the woman he held. Taro beat his strong wings, sending the wind and clouds swirling away behind the two, and headed to the camp. Left square bracket clearing right square bracket. Cologne beat Taro over the head with the empty jar. Never do that again, boy! Double quote. It was peculiar. The long, dark-haired beauty calling the taller, older-looking Taro a boy. Gosankuji would have found it funny if he hadn't felt so guilty about what he'd done to Hinako. Especially now that Kawagyu is back. The weight of guilt crushed his heart. The teacher sat quietly, leaning against a tree, looking up at the blue sky. She'd been like that since she woke up. Gosankuji turned away from her, his eyes downcast. He'd remembered how she had woken up, an extremely embarrassed look on her face. She'd turned away, clutching the blanket to herself and pulled her clothing under the blanket with her. Gosankuji had turned away in shame and embarrassment while she dressed herself under the blanket. He felt her eyes on him, pouring into him from her spot by the fire. Silent tears had traced their way down his face as he stood, never daring to turn around. Until Taro and Cologne landed between the two of them. The pair had a fight over the water. Cologne was ready to toss it over Hinako then and there, and Taro had grabbed onto the bottom of the jar. The tug of war that resulted had both of them glaring at each other, both getting angrier and angrier. Then Taro had tried to trip Cologne and steal the jar away. His foot spun out at her so fast that she only just managed to dodge. Pulling the jar out of both of their grips, it spun out of control through the air and landed in the soft grass, on its side. The cursed water spilled out of the jar, draining away as everyone looked on in horror. Brought back into the present at Taro's yelling, Gosankuji started and looked sullenly at the Tadaptaru, growled at Cologne, then snorted, "If that's how you repay me for sifting you, I'm going!" Exclamation point, double quote. Cologne rolled her eyes, and folded her arms under her breasts. "Go? Boy, you are about as useless as that Ranma used to be. Go on. Fly off and be the papazi again, or whatever it is that you do. I'm going to go back to the village." Double quote. She turned to Gosankuji and Inako. Kneeling down beside Inako, Kawaii started another checkup, testing Inako's key levels, Hertzable points, and asking various questions, which Hinako answered with a nod or a shake off her head. Gosankuji shriveled inside. She'd not said a word since she had woken up. Double quote. "Well, you seem perfectly alright now. Although, for some reason, double quote." Cologne turned an accusing gaze on Gosankuji. He quailed. Without taking her eye from the young man, she continued, "Her hormones are in a total mess. It will take her body time to slow down and adjust, so until then, she won't be turning into a child. It will probably take a day or two, at the most." Double quote. "Less than obviously, that boy has given her what she wanted. I was hoping that it couldn't happen, but her hand-key has been completely drained from her body. Her orgasm must have sent a blast of the key into both the boy and the surrounding plants of the clearing. Greater than." She placed her hand on the earth for a moment, silently taking a key reading of the grass by her feet. Her eyebrows rose. "Less than HMM. I think that this will become a popular clearing for the young lovers of the village sometime soon." Greater than. Her thoughts turned back to Hinako and Gosankuji. "Less than what single quote is done, and there is nothing I can do to change the past. My problem is back at the village." Greater than. She single quote did go back. She'd work her way back as a valued member of her clan, again. "Less than. But the first hurdle will be to convince the elders that I had not run away, Greater than. Cologne sighed to herself. "Less than. I can only expect more punishment for this. Even if it was some idiot boy, posing as a Minotaur, who had actually smashed his way in and rescued me." Greater than. Cologne felt an emptiness opening in her heart, remembering the destruction of the house. It hadn't been her house, but her husband had put his shirt into his work. There was that much less of him for her to remember him by. Something else missing of him. She turned to look back up the path, towards the village. She couldn't speak his name. She could not even think his name. Speaking his name might bring his ghost to haunt the village. "Less than. Oh, I wish you were still with me." Greater than. She held the feelings deep inside her heart, and looked at the Tishikamito china with Taru, ignored, stomped off, into the forest. Double quote. "You two must make your way home, yourselves. I've got a debt to pay ATME village." She hoped that somewhere along the way, whatever had passed between them would be worked out. Love was a funny thing, so taciturn. Love and hate. There was a thin line between the two. Gosankuji nodded his assent. She took one last look at the two, then turned and walked, till she disappeared between the trees. Left square bracket forest right square bracket goes Sankuji and the still adult Hinako walked in silence, both thinking their own thoughts, too wrapped up in their own minds to do more than walk. Hours had passed, but Go-Sankuji didn't feel worthy to even say a word to her. So he walked on, carrying the packs. An even heavier weight was on his mind. Finally Hinako spoke. Ikaru question mark H. Hi. Go-Sankuji's heart beat faster, scared to death of what she'd say. He knew that the closest thing that he'd ever had to friendship log on, he'd thrown it away, just for a few moments of lust. He berated himself over and over in his mind, hating himself. I single quote been thinking. Double quote the words made the shunt voice dread even more. Her voice was so hollow to his ears, and I'm not sure what really to say. She paused to search for the words. A small frown graced her smooth forehead as she continued, Hikaru, I wish things had been different, my first time. I guess I can blame you for it, but I am angry. Just let me work this all through. I need time to think. Go-Sankuji single quote S world crumbled even more. I single quote never had many thoughts as an adult before. Hikaru. Not like this. I realized that I've always been just a child in my thoughts and in Myakuyan's, not just my body. She turned to regard him for a moment, noticing how he failed to meet her gaze. His eyes focused on the ground, where they stayed. Shame burned on his face. I know that this change stings between us a lot. She took a deep breath and let it out, feeling a calmness settle on her. I single quote been hurt inside. But I guess that I've hurt you, too. All those times that I just used you for dinner or to walk me home, with not even a word of thanks. She sighed softly and turned to stare at the ground. I've searched my heart, and, well, everything between us has always been wrong. Go-Sankuji stumbled slightly. It was all he could do to keep walking. He felt so empty. He just wanted to lay down and die. It will take a while before things are properly worked out between us. In the forest, it felt wonderful. But I just couldn't stop my body. I was expecting something to happen like that. But it's not your fault, it's that dirty old man's fault. Hinako took on a deep breath and whispered, Hikaru, to start with, I'd like to say that I'm sorry for how I've treated you. Go-Sankuji mumbled something incoherently, his feelings so badly shaken about that he could hardly tell up from down anymore. She stopped still, and he almost ran into her. So suddenly did she stop. Closing her eyes, she hugged herself tightly and whispered, and Hikaru, I forgive you. Go-Sankuji single quote S eyes rolled back and he fainted, the contents of the pack scattering all over the place as he hit the ground. She sighed and looked down at the unconscious man at her feet. She shook her head slowly. I'm still angry at you, Hikaru-chan, but that Wilpus, One day soon, maybe then we can at least be friends again. Kneeling down, she gently brushed Gosankuji's hair back from his eyes. A small smile crossed her lips. And if we can work it out, maybe, one day we can be more than just friends. Ranma Nibun no Ichi is for Hinako epilogue right square bracket left square bracket Nirima right square bracket as Gosankuji and Hinako traveled. In Japan a phone rang. Moshi, Moshi. Akane answered the telephone. Oh, hi Kasumi Onichan. How are you? As Akane listened, her eyes grew wider, and her mouth dropped open. Fontane? Onichan ? As her sister replied. Akane broke into smiles. Congratulations, Onichan! That single quote s wonderful ! Hoi! Akane, what is it? Ranma called over. The rest of the family watched Akane's grin and she seemed to be bursting with energy. All of a sudden they were all very curious as to what was going on. Nodoka, Ranma and Soun were all looking at Akane, all poking their head out of the door. Akane finished off her conversation with her sister. Hi. Please come over for dinner, Onichan. Tonight we'll be alright. Hi. That will be fine! Please, take care and we'll see you and Tofu-sensei then. Northeast ? Slowly, Akane put down the phone and turned to the rest, who were now out in the hallway. Not even pretending to be, just walking by the door. Kasumi-Onichan and Tofu-sensei are going to have a baby! And pandemonium broke out. Please, give CNC on my fanfic. It would be helpful. Spelling, grammar, comma, etc. Right parenthesis. Thanks to Azadlon, Chris Jones, anonymous reviewer JS is shy to leave his name in a lemon fanfic. Jim Laser, Redneck Bayan, Bill Sane and Alex Neeson for their CNC for the story so far, especially to Alex who ticked most of this story up for me! Jet. Mada! Kunoi Ayani Makunoi Ayani Mushlam at Ranmamakakan at Kawaii Makukai at Fortuni Akodakai at Fiction Makaroli not real life at www.acro.mu.obs.o/tilde less than Kunoi Ayatiki.org greater than Ranma Nibun no Ichi 10 skin deep. Lemon right square bracket. All characters portrayed in this fanfic are copyright of Rumiko Takahashi and Shogakukan. Incorporated, etc. Etc. Left square bracket Nakeful and right square bracket Who swept the floor of the Nakeful and enjoying the chore. It was just himself and Shampoo running the place without Cologne to interfere. He hoped that it would last. Word had gotten back to them that the euthanaid woman was trying to atone for her misdeeds. She had put her pride aside and was doing a man's work for the Jokutsuzoku. Menial chores not fit for a woman. Through this, she hoped to restore her honor and join the tribe once again. He wasn't sure that Cologne would like it, but he knew that she would endure. Cologne was originally only meant to labor for a month, But with the trouble Taru had created, her punishment was changed to a year. The fact that she hadn't wanted to go with Taru didn't matter to the tribe. Moose almost laughed at the thought of Cologne doing all of the jobs Bob himself had to do. Less than I hope she never returns so she can never push me around again! Greater than looking over at Shampoo, Moose smiled even. Though he only saw a Fazaikarard shape. He would endure Cologne for Shampoo's sake. Her love meant much to him. Just to boot the woman out when she returned. Noticing how her husband had stopped sweeping, Shampoo smiled back at Moose. Addressing him in Chinese, she called, "If you've finished already, come and help me dry the dishes." Just a minute. He finished sweeping the room quickly, and joined his wife in the kitchen. He was perfectly content. They ran an equal hand and together as husband and wife. And with Cologne gone, his life was a dream. They gave the occasional spat, and Shampoo would insult him as she used to. He still considered himself to be the luckiest man on earth. Left square bracket drive to Fu's clinic right square bracket. Kasumi sat down on a chair with a sigh. She had been cooking dinner when the baby kicked. She had winced at the sudden sensation inside her, the feeling of new life to Fu and her child. She placed a hand over her swollen belly. It wouldn't be long now until their child was ready to be born. Maybe a month, if that Dr. Fu was looking after a patient at the moment. But Kasumi was happy just to sit and rest for a few moments. She could make sure that nothing burned, but she didn't feel like standing at the oven for any longer. She closed her eyes for a moment and relaxed. She loved her new life with her husband, looking after the clinic, helping as a nurse to some of the patients. No more looking after her sisters, not now that they had both gotten married, or her father. Now that was Akane's responsibility. Akane was now the lady of the Tendu house, the mother of two beautiful children and Ranma's wife. It was a much easier life for Kasumi, living at the clinic. She was pampered and looked after by her wonderful husband. Life at the clinic would get complex with a baby, but she and Fu had talked about it, and they were both ready to be parents. Kasumi smiled to herself. Like always, everything would turn out fine. Left square bracket somewhere in Mirima right square bracket. Asuka Sajinomiya, the White Lily, looked like her nickname. She was an elegant, high-class woman in a beautiful white evening gown, a large white lily at her shoulder. Long, white gloves and beautiful blonde locks of hair made her seem even more beautiful. I am here to duel with you again. Oh ho 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 ho. Her laughter spoiled her aura of refinement. She continued to laugh as she disappeared in a scattering of white petals. Left square bracket Tendu Dojo right square bracket. Miso was almost 2 years old now. He crawled around the dojo floor, exploring his surroundings under Akane's watchful eyes. Ranma himself going through his kata, letting Miyabi copy his movements. Akane had finally consented to allow him to teach their daughter Kempo. Ranma was proud of his daughter, who showed remarkable strength, agility and an aptitude for martial arts. Less than it must run in the family, greater than he thought, looking from his daughter to his wife. Less than her brute strength and my martial skills. Greater than. Akane looked back at Ranma for a moment, and wondered about the smug look on his face. She did not ask, instead going back to watching Miso. She enjoyed this time together, a quiet moment without the rest of the family barking in. Just Ranma, herself, their son and daughter. Come on, Akane. Your turn to show Miyabi some moves. Ranma slung a towel around his neck and scooped up Miso in his arms. The little boy giggled to pat his father, reaching up to try to grab his pigtail. Yes, Mama. You teach me now. Miyabi jumped up and down excitedly as her mother stood up, and took a stance before her. Okay, Miya-chan, like this. Akane started to practice with her daughter more because she knew how much her daughter loved martial arts than Fromani need to teach her. Ranma had obviously been sneakily teaching Miyabi and the little girl was very good for her 5 years of age. Maybe even Genma had been teaching her, too. Akane smiled lovingly at her daughter, then over at her husband and son as she went through her own kata. Left square bracket Nirima Gymnasium right square bracket Kodakai was practicing one of her gymnastic routines at the Nirima Gymnasium. She wore a beautiful leotard on her curved, athletic body. The black shape of a rose against skin-colored material made it seem as if she was wearing petals over her body instead of a skin-tight bodysuit. She stood on her toes, twirling her ribbon as she began her warm-up. A woman's voice called from behind her. Kunyu Kodakai double quote Sanzen in Kodakai. Kodakai corrected, pivoting on one foot to face the speaker. She saw the white lily standing there, and gritted her teeth. Asuka the white lily continued as if she hadn't heard. I gave you a few extra years to be ready for this duel. But the time is now! Double quote well, now that I have the most handsome man in all of Japan, I will let I win this double date duel. Ho 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 ho. Kodakai threw back her head. The back of a hand pressed lightly against her lips. Less than the last time we dueled, you had to kidnap a beautiful man. But I had married one, and no longer have to resort to making Ranma pretend to be my date. You will lose properly this time. Asuka! Greater than Asuka gave a refined smile, and sipped tea from a porcelain cup that had appeared from nowhere. So arrogant. Kodakai. We shall see. Tonight bring your date to my mansion! Double quote I look forward to beating you, Asuka. With that, Kodakai swirled her black gymnastic ribbon, and disappeared in an explosion of black rose petals. A slight smirk crossed Asuka's face, and she spoke to the empty room. Akane Sanzanin, you say? Now I will find this man you had married, and make sure that he can never be a challenger in this duel of ours. Ho 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 ho! Double quote left square bracket Kunyu -ka right square bracket. Soon Kodakai was leaping over the rooftops towards the Kunyu mansion, ready for any tricks that Asuka had up her sleeve. Kodakai had to win this battle. Her husband had to be the best-looking man in all of Japan! She soon reached the Kunyuka, and entered through a window, straight into the room she shared with Mikado. He was there, standing before a full-length mirror, trying on a new skating outfit. Double quote Mikado-sama, did I ever tell you about my kindergarten rival, Asuka Funhike Lily? Double quote turning. Mikado swept Kodakai in his arms and kissed her deeply. He held her in his arms, her body pressing against his, both in their skin-tight outfits. He could feel her sexy body against his, her response to his kiss. He whispered softly against her lips, "No, my Kodakai, why would I wish to hear about anyone other than you?" Double quote She looked up at him, and sighed happily. He was so good looking. In fact, she thought he was even better looking than Ranma. His charm was very much greater than Ranma's charm. Mikado still took every opportunity that he could to try to charm women, and always had, and his ego was large enough to allow him to carry it off without a problem. Women fell at Mikado's feet. Most women, anyway. They also fell at his feet when Kodakai paralyzed them for trying to get too close to her man. A kiss was one thing, and Mikado was legendary for his kissing boot anything more, and Kodakai got jealous. Mikado had no interest in any of his fangirls, But sometimes the girls got a little too carried away when they saw their idol Kodakai broke off, and sat down on the bed. Now was not the time for discusses, not when Asuka could be here any moment to deal with her husband. Asuka is a girl who attacked my boyfriend at kindergarten, claiming that her boyfriend was better. She thought she won, but my coolest, said boyfriend never recovered. She started the duel, and now we must win. You must be ready for our double date. But, my love, I am already the sexiest, coolest and most good-looking man in all of Japan. What else is there to do? Mikado flashed a smile at her. Yes, but she will be wanting to deal with you before the date. She ice-wicked and sneaky and will set cowardly traps for you, trying to defeat me with my honest approach to the duel. You must stay away from all fire skating matches until I can find her boyfriend and take him out of competition first! Mikado blinked, and said softly, but if I don't go to my competitions, Yusu will come here and cause problems. Also, how could I upset all of my fans? I could no more make them cry than I could hurt you, my beloved Black Rose! Mikado-sama, you must do as I say. It won't take long. Kodakai pulled a bunch of bottles out of a drawer and smirked. Asuka the White Lily will be sorry she ever came back to challenge me! Left square bracket Ukan single quote S right square bracket Suko was crying. Ryuga picked up his daughter and held her close, trying to quiet her down while Yukayu served okonomiyaki. He was too scared to leave the confines of the bedroom while holding his baby girl. Even Fashirokuro was at his feet. If he wandered off with the baby, Yukayu would get really mad at him. Suko was still too young to go off on Ryuga's travels. She still needed her mother. SHH, Sachan. Daddy's here, SHHH. His voice seemed to soothe Suko a little, though she was still not a happy baby. Shirokuro barked, and walked over to the bedroom door, and headed into the hallway. Then she sat down at the bathroom door, and barked at Ryuga. You think she needs changed? Ryuga looked out of the door at his half-black, half-white dog. Hesitantly he stepped out and walked to his dog, then stepped into the bathroom. He didn't usually get lost while inside the house, but he didn't want to take any chances. When inside, he proceeded to change Suko's nappies. He was a good father, always extremely gentle with his daughter, and always loving. Although he realized that Suko was strong for a baby, she seemed to have inherited his strength. He still treated her with extra care. When he disposed of the dirty nappies, and had his daughter in nice, clean nappies, he turned back around to the hallway. Yukayu was standing there at the bathroom door. She smiled at him, and hugged him as he came out into the hall. These two females were the most precious things in his life. He was happy. Left square bracket Kunyu -ka right square bracket Nabiki and Kunyu sat in the living room, watching television. Kunyu's mind was as blank as always, and Nabiki was bored. She really had no need to go out and make money being married to take what he had changed up, but she enjoyed the challenge. Now all she really had to do was enjoy the life of a rich girl, waited on hand and foot by her husband, and if he wasn't around, she had Susuksurugakura to do her bidding. He wasn't much of a ninja, but he was good at doing the tasks she set for him. She hadn't really had to worry about her rivalry with Kodakai in ages, either. She needed something to spice up her life a little. Being the idol wreck wasn't all it was cracked up to be. Takai, let's go for a walk. You haven't taken me shopping in so long. Kunyu stood up immediately and bowed. Let us go, my beautiful wife. We shall shop until you are satisfied. Then we can shop some more, my sexy goddess! Nabiki laughed, and stood, taking his arm. Heading to the front door of Takunu Mansion, they were almost knocked down by Kodakai as she leaped past them and out of the door, laughing insanely. Takunu scratched his head, and looked after his sister as she gracefully leaped off down the street. Nabiki's eyes narrowed. Less than there might be something interesting happening after all. Greater than Wait for a moment, Takai. I'd like to speak to your brother-in-law first. Be back. Nabiki headed back into the interior of the house, heading off to find Mikado, leaving Kunyu waiting for her at the door. Walking through the large mansion, Nabiki made her way to the Mikado and Kodakai's room. She knocked on the door, and it opened a moment later. Yes, Nabiki? I don't have any extra money for any photos at the moment, though I might be willing to pose if you wish to sell some to my fans. He smiled a stunning smile at her. No. That wasn't what I wanted to talk to you about. Well, I'm sure of that we could work something out regarding photos for your fangirls. The golden pair don't have an official photographer, do they? It wasn't Wish was there, but arranging to make a little extra cash on the side never hurt anyone. Mikado took Nabiki's hand, and kissed it. You may, of course, become our photographer. I've seen how wonderful your photos are, and I know that the photos you take of me will make all the women out there so happy. Nabiki rolled her eyes, but business was business. It's settled, then. Oh, by the way, did something happen between you and Kodakai? She went off in a hurry. No. Mikado dropped her hand, and leaned up against the door frame to telegram. She's worried about some girl she has a double date with. She thinks that this Oscar will do something to meet you in some challenge they set up while they were children. Of course I will win, as no one can be better looking than me. He paused to run his hands through his hair. But she is off to put a stop to this Oscar's plots. Nabiki gave a slight nod. She would probably have agreed that Mikado wasted one of the best-looking men she had ever seen, but she'd gotten to know him and his ego detracted from his looks. Oh, if there was a chance that something interesting might happen, she and Kunyu may not gossiping after all. Anyway, she had a vague recollection of an Oscar, but she couldn't quite place a trying to remember. Nabiki wandered back off to find her husband and maybe pay a visit to her little sister. Left square bracket outside the Kunyu-ka right square bracket Azusa giggled as she and Tsubasa entered the Kunyuka. She was having too much fun with Tsubasa, both of them wearing the exact same, cute dress. In fact, she'd been having so much fun actually spending time talking with Zombie that she'd completely forgotten that she and Mikado had a skating match coming up. Asuka watched from across the road as Azusa and the other girl entered the mansion grounds. It had been too easy to find out about Sanzanin. The Mikado Sanzanin of the Golden Pair and his skating partner Azusa Shiratori. She was actually rather worried. Mikado was such a good-looking man, and not the usual dross that she thought Kodakai might have hooked up with. Less than I will have to deal with him. Oh, I will regret having to do anything to such a beautiful man. Greater than she disappeared in a swirl of lily petals as Nabiki and Kunio left. The Kunio mansion. Left square bracket Tendu -ka right square bracket Akane was nursing Maso as Nabiki came into their bedroom. She could hear Kunio and Ranma arguing outside somewhere, but there was nothing to log at. They didn't attack each other too much, anyway. Log is it? Nabiki -Onichin question mark Hey, sis. Got a question for you. Nabiki smiled as Miyabi came running into the room to see her. At Nabiki, she lifted her knees up, and together as Miyabi snuggled against her. I remember you talked about a girl called Asuka once. Something to do with Kodakai. You wouldn't happen to remember her, would you? Akane frowned slightly, but proceeded to tell Nabiki the story of Asuka's White Lily and Ranma's date with Kodakai. Left square bracket Kunio -ka right square bracket Stop it. Mikado yelled at Azusa, a look of sheer and utter frustration on his face. As he screamed at her, his partner shrank back, clutching the chair to her that she had been whacking him with. She started to sniff. Tsubasa glared at Mikado, and wrapped an arm around the sniffing girl, hoping to stop Azusa before she started to cry. Azusa didn't just cry, she howled. She only wanted you to go off to your skating match. Tsubasa managed to yell a cute voice at Mikado as Azusa began to wail like a banshee. You won't make it if you don't hurry! Mikado sighed and started to comb his hair, trying to ignore the crying from Azusa. If she didn't get her away, she started to beat him with things and then cry whenever he got upset. The problem was that Tsubasa didn't like it. Mikado turned his smile on Tsubasa for some reason. It did not ever seem to work like it would on a normal girl. But there was always a first time. My dear Tsubasa, if only the Golden Pair could make it. But there seems to be a bit of a problem. There is an insane woman out there who would make skating, he chose his word carefully, difficult for us right now. Should we go? And should we skate? I can only believe that we shall be attacked at the competition. Azusa suddenly stopped crying. But that's what we do. Our martial arts skating will defeat anyone who comes against us! I know. Mikado shook his head slightly. But this girl doesn't skate. If she is not on the ice, it would be an unfair fight. Well, defeat her with a kiss. Azusa pouted slightly. Then we can get on with the skating competition! Mikado moved and suddenly, standing very close to Tsubasa, He stood so close that the frills of the pink dress were pressed against him, and Tsubasa was forced to look up into Mikado's face. Like this, he whispered as the air around him suddenly started to sparkle with a pink glow, and he leaned down to kiss Tsubasa. Double quote. I like girls, Tsubasa screamed, struggling in Mikado's arms. The pretty, long brown hair getting tangled and the pink bow falling to the ground. Frowning, Mikado stopped and let Tsubasa go, who jumped away, panting and looking rather upset. Glaring at Mikado, Tsubasa took Azusa by the hand, and stormed out of the room. Less than what a strange girl. Greater than shaking his head, Mikado went back to the mirror to finish getting ready. He wasn't sure about taking the advice of Azusa and her strange friend. He had been too busy kissing Kodakai when Tsubasa had made a gender-related revelation, but he really did want to skate. Less than, and what could one girl do to me? Anyway, I will be there, win the skating competition, make this white lily fall in love with me so she gives up her silly fight with my beloved Kodakai, and be back before anyone even knows I'm gone! Greater than. He looked at himself in the mirror again, making sure of his perfection, and left to follow Tsubasa and Azusa to the skating rink. Left square bracket somewhere over China, right square bracket. A gigantic creature, a terrible mix of animals, flew over the Chinese countryside. It looked somewhat like a minotaur, but multiple tentacles protruded from its back. Its tail was like a serpent, though it flew on large wings. Less than Hato's eyes. Where are you? I will make you change that stupid Pseudo-Toru name you gave me, and then I will kill you! Greater than. The creature searched as it continued to fly, filled with rage and anger. Left square bracket ice-skating rink, right square bracket. Mikado and Azusa posed in the center of the rink, both beautifully dressed up in their skating outfits. Azusa even looked more adult while performing, the two looking like a perfect skating god and goddess on the ice. They had just defeated their opponents, without even breaking a sweat. It was not just their looks, but their ability on the rink that drove their fans wild. As the spectators cheered wildly, one beautiful woman sat and watched with a slight frown. Asuka had not realized how perfect Mikado was. His photos did not do him justice. Maybe it was the way he flowed over the ice, so graceful and deadly, or it could be his charisma that electrified the whole room. But Asuka was worried. Less than. If I don't deal with him soon, Kodakai just might win. Greater than. Left square bracket Tendo-ka right square bracket double quote. So what Asuka does is try to damage the looks of Kodakai's date, and win that way. How childish. Nabiki gave a shrug. Is that it? Double quote. Well, she also kidnapped a man, pretending to be dating him so she could win the date. I think she used chloroform on him, and his girlfriend found him and took him away. Akane gave a laugh. He was gorgeous, though. Double quote. Maybe I'll have a look into this white lily and see if she has anything planned. Nabiki smirked, Less than Mikado and Kodakai will own me. Big time exclamation point greater than left square bracket Nirima right square bracket appearing in a swirl of black rose petals. Kodakai laughed as she startled yet another good-looking man, who had been talking to a pretty girl. The girl screamed in fright, and ran away with a terrified look on her face as the insane gymnast flicked her, whip-like, with a ribbon. The man had no time to move as Kodakai threw him a bouquet of black roses. The roses exploded in a blast of paralysis gas, sending him falling to the pavement, unconscious. One of these has to be her boyfriend. She will never win. Ho 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 ho! Exclamation point double quote. Kodakai talked to the empty street as she picked up the man, and leaped off towards the Kunuka, intent on locking him in the underground training hall with the others she had captured. Midori Game-kun, not a pet turtle or pet alligator, would guard them all. Left square bracket Ukon single quote S right square bracket Ryugu was upstairs looking after Suko when Nabiki turned up. She ignored the customers and went straight to the griddle where Yukayu was making some yakonomiyaki. Double quote Yukayu, I've got a proposition for you. I need you to dress up as a guy for a date. Double quote Yukayu looked at Nabiki in surprise. Can't you just take Kunu out on a date? Double quote no, not for me. And not on a real date, either. Double quote she proceeded to tell Yukayu about Asuka the White Lily and the double date duel. Yukayu listened and wondered what Nabiki was up to. It wasn't like her to just go and help someone, not without monetary gain, anyway. But Nabiki didn't even mention money. Left square bracket Asuka single quote S mansion right square bracket. Asuka was furious as she walked back and forth in her room. Her date had disappeared, and she didn't know where. It was true, she had knocked him out, but she had made sure that this time he hadn't already had a girlfriend. Less than where could he have gone? I've got to find him before the duel! Exclamation point greater than left square bracket Nirima right square bracket Yukayu, all dressed up in a tuxedo with her long hair flowing around her shoulders, walked down the street. Her breasts had been bound up under her clothes, and it felt rather uncomfortable. She was a mother with a 2-year-old girl, and hadn't bothered with looking like the man in such a long time! Exclamation point when she heard that Asuka was probably going to attack Mikado, she just had to help Nabiki out with this plot. Mikado had gone out of his way to help everyone in the past, especially when trying to help Akane regain her lost memory when Cologne had first gone insane. He was a good guy, despite his reputation. Yukayu knew she just had to help out, and realized that if this worked, then no one would get hurt. She nervously fiddled with the bashi at her neck, and continued walking down the street. Ryugu would look after Suko, though he had been worried that Yukayu was going off to deal with something by herself. Yukayu had told him that she'd be fine, and told him not to worry, but Ryugu was Ryugu. She loved her husband for his sweet nature, but she had to remind him that each time he got lost, she had to watch out for herself. He had reluctantly agreed to let her go through with the plan. Yukio continued walking, not really noticing the few girls that walked past, who turned to stare at the beautiful man in the tuxedo. Left square bracket is use a single quote S house right square bracket is use sat down, still in her skating outfit but this time wearing rollerblades on her feet. Tsubasa sat next to her, still looking rather upset. Azusa had never really seen Tsubasa this upset before, and the bad mood had lasted a long time. Even when the golden pair had won the competition, Tsubasa hadn't cheered up. She thought Tsubasa looked odd, with such a glum face surrounded by all the cute, fluffy toys in the pretty, frilly, pink and white colored room. What is wrong, Angelique? Azusa had never started using Tsubasa's name. She felt that Angelique sweetened Tsubasa much more than coronate Tsubasa single quote. It was a silly Japanese name, not a cute French name. At Mikado, he tried to kiss me. It was horrible. Tsubasa had given up trying to correct Azusa long ago. Northeast, he does that to all the pretty girls. Azusa kicked up her feet and fell back on her bed, looking up at Tsubasa with a giggle. It doesn't mean anything to him, not anymore. A half smile formed on Tsubasa's face. No, I'm beautiful, so much more pretty than those ugly girls out there. But don't forget that I'm a guy. I can kiss another guy! Exclamation point! Azusa popped back up into a seating position. Oh, I forgot. With that comment she kissed Tsubasa full on the lips. Tsubasa froze in shock. It was some moments before feeling returned to his body, and he could feel Azusa's soft lips against his own. A cross-dresser he might be, but he liked girls. He blush-colored his cheeks as he slowly returned the kiss. He slid his arms around her and pulled her against him. Azusa was much more used to acting like a young girl than her age. She was in her 20s, and although she had a ton of fans, she'd never really thought about having a boyfriend. No guy had drawn her fancy, not like all the cute things she collected did. She enjoyed the feeling of having so many men worship her, but beyond that she hadn't really cared. The idea of kissing Tsubasa had suddenly popped in her head. Impulsive, she had just done it, and it felt good. Tsubasa held her tightly. The skating outfit was skin-tight on Azusa, so he could feel her soft body against his. He felt her hands slide around to his back, one sliding up to start playing with his long hair, and he gave a shiver as certain biological functions started to kick in. He let go of her, pulling back from the kiss as his blush deepened. Azusa ... She gave a giggle, letting go of him. Well, you don't seem to be a girl ... but I can still call you Angelique. Northeast ? But I'm a guy. The attempted kiss from Mikado had already made him defensive, and the sudden kiss from Azusa had put him off balance. He hadn't been expecting that, nor the sudden feelings that had flooded his body. He really liked Azusa, but until that moment, he'd been happy just being Barako, pretending to be a child with her, being her friend. It was fun spending so much time with a cute girl. Azusa kissing him was the last thing he had expected. Without thinking, he undid his dress, freed his arms from the sleeves and pulled down the bodice. He was indeed a male. His chest was flat and his shoulders and torso were that of a man. Despite his hair floating down in tresses around his shoulders, it was still obvious. Even with the pink frills of the dress pulled at his waist, he still looked manly. Azusa's single quote's eyes opened wide, and she reached out and touched his chest, her fingers lightly running over his skin. "You look so different," she said softly. He gasped and struggled to move back, not sure of what he should be doing, and got caught in his dress. He only succeeded in falling back on the bed, his hair spreading over the white bed covers. Confused, he stared up at Azusa, his face still flushed. "Less than wow, he's so cute when he blushes!" Greater than with a giggle, she leaned down and kissed him again. She felt him freeze again before he relaxed and again started kissing her back. She found that she did enjoy kissing him. She felt warm inside, a flutter in her stomach like butterflies. It was like finding a cute new playmate, but even better. It was like when her fans cheered after she and Mikado had won a competition! Tsubasa closed his eyes and concentrated on the sensation of the kiss, with Azusa against him. Her breasts felt so soft against his chest, and their body so light as she leaned on him to kiss him. Before long, all thoughts of Mikado fled from his mind. All other thoughts slipped away as he enjoyed the situation. Azusa, leaning against him, was surprised when she felt him take hold of her waist and roll her over to reverse their positions. She now lay unheeded, her rollerblade-covered feet touching the floor, with the bare chest at Tsubasa on top of her. He brushed a few strands of hair away from her face and started to kiss her again. She kissed him back, with more passion as the pleasure of the situation increased for her. The more passionately she kissed, the more passion she felt, and the more Tsubasa's body responded to her. Azusa discovered that he was definitely male as Tsubasa's erection pressed against her hip. She herself blushed, but she wrapped her arms around him, and continued their kissing. The warm feeling in her stomach seemed to spread through her body, causing her own body to react to his. It was not a feeling that she was used to, but she reveled in the pleasure so much more exciting than a skating match! As he felt her start to move under him, as she arched herself and held him against her, he suddenly realized what he'd been doing and he jumped away, or tried to. With her martial arts skating, Azusa was stronger than she looked. He pushed away, a hand each side of her shoulders, but only succeeded in leaning away from her, his hips still locked against hers as he held on to him. Azusa, "I'm so sorry, I should go." He didn't want to move this fast with her, not with the only girl who was ever interested in him. She had kissed him first, but going too far might spoil this new interest she had in him. He really liked her and didn't want to do anything that might hurt her in any way. "Why? Don't you want to kiss me anymore?" Azusa, too used to getting her own way, and with too little experience at holding back her emotions, gave a bow and a slight frown. A look that threatened to turn into her use wild bawling if she didn't get her away. No. It's not that. It's single quote s hyphen hyphen double quote. What is it then? Why won't you kiss me? She gave a sniff as she looked up into his eyes. It was way too easy for Azusa to play with Tsubase's emotions. No, he began. I do want to. But Tsubase knew he couldn't whine against Azusa. He never liked it when Mikado made it upset, and it hurt him to even think that he could ever do anything to upset her. Of course I don't to kiss you. I'm sorry. Her look changed back as quickly as she had become upset. She smiled at him and closed her eyes. Kiss me. He lowered himself to lay against her and kissed her again. As she kissed him back, she started to stroke her hands up and down his bare back, and through his hair that hung down around his face and shoulders. The new sensual sensations started to flood her body again, and the more she felt him give back into his pleasure, the more her own pleasure grew. Letting herself go, she explored her sexual feelings for the first time. Her body felt hot. She could feel her own heartbeat pounding and tingly soft pleasure built up at her. Sex. She started rocking herself under Tsubase. Slowly at first, she began to move faster as she felt more pleasure shoot through her body. Tsubase hesitated at first, but Azusa's motions under him were too sexy for him to think straight. Her excited state drove him back into the new world of passion with her, and her kisses were sweeter than plum wine. Soon he, too, was rocking against her, his manhood hot and hard under the dress he only half wore. Azusa moved slightly, and lifted her legs, her rollerblades spinning in the air as she pressed her thighs tightly against his hips. She needed to be touched down there, between her legs. The sensation was driving her crazy. She was so hot and felt so damp and just needed relief somehow. She rocked at her hips, adjusting how their hips met, until she could feel his hard length under all that material, meeting her needs. She shuddered and gave a soft moan into his mouth as the contact through their clothing gave you even more pleasure. Tsubase groaned as they got into their new rhythm, feeling her legs holding him tightly, his manhood being rubbed against her private spot. With a hand he reached down, and fumbling, tried to pull the dress away from his hips. After a moment, he managed to succeed in pushing it away from himself so that all that stood between them was his boxer shorts and her ice skatingly uttered. They moved together, their motions bringing pleasure to them both. He could feel her heat, her dampness through their thin clothing, loving how it all felt against his erect length. She could feel with each stroke of him between her legs more and more pleasure, and her need grew greater. They both wanted more, but made no move to do anything but explore this first step in sexuality together. They kissed and pleasured each other with their body movements, sending each other closer and closer to the edge. With a sudden gasp, Azusa's body shivered and she arched up as waves of pleasure went through her. emanating from between her legs. She closed her eyes, and held on to Tsubasa tightly, keeping him still and pressing her hips hard against his. She held on for a few moments until she collapsed back on the bed, her body relaxing after the orgasm wave finally let her go. Tsubasa watched the pleasure in her face through his own half-opened, passion-filled eyes. The look was too much for him, and he lost control as his own pleasure took control of his body. As soon as his Yusa relaxed her grip, he thrust his hips against her, and came. He shuddered as his body pumped his seat out, catching in his boxer shorts. Too soon for him. It was over and he let himself relax against his Yusa. Both hot, sweaty and wet, they kissed once more before Tsubasa said softly, "We D better get cleaned up and changed, You and then we'll go see if San-chan and Nodoka need help." Northeast Angelic ? Tsubasa face faulted. "I'm not Angelic. I'm a man! Left square bracket Nirima right square bracket Gosunkuji walked slowly down the street, with a young Hinako walking at his side. Things had been a bit strained between them when Hinako was in her true adult form, but when she was in child form, she still was close to him. She still had him tidying up her room and wanting to go to dinner with him. It was hard on Gosunkuji, still trying to deal with his cold thought it had been so long ago. What had happened in China? He knew that she had forgiven him, but he wasn't sure that he was ready to forgive himself. Yet it was he himself who was making things strained between them. Once Hinako had gotten over her anger, she had realized that she, too, had been to blame. Well, it was actually Hapozai's fault. If Hapozai ever returned, she would be ready to punish him for what he'd done. And Shou could make sure that Gosunkuji took part in that battle. He needed to know if it was Hapozai and Rakaiuzai's, and maybe he would be able to start to leave his cult behind. She liked Gosunkuji a lot, and often her mind kept going back to the way she'd felt when he had fulfilled her need. But in child form, she could not deal with her thoughts. She just knew that she liked him and so hung around with him. The two walked past Yukayu as she continued to walk down the streets of Nirima. Gosunkuji frowned at Yukayu, but continued on with Hinako. It wasn't his business if Yukayu had decided to start cross-dressing again. Yukayu hadn't even noticed him. Anyway, Yukayu walked slowly, looking around every so often for a beautiful woman in white. She had seen any number of girls, but no one matching Asuka's description. Not yet, anyway. It was actually rather dull, walking around the streets this late in the afternoon. She wandered down towards the park, a good place to watch the setting sun. It might be harder to find this woman while there, but at least she could sit down by the lake and relax for a while. As she headed into the park, she heard laughter behind her. Suddenly she was surrounded by flying petals and gas, and before she could turn around to see her attacker, She fell unconscious. Left square bracket Kunio hyphen right square bracket less than well, that's them all. All that I could find. Anyway. Greater than Kodakai entered the mansion, and headed to her room, laughing. Hearing her, Mikado opened the door to their bedroom, and led his wife in. My love, I'm so glad that you have returned. Did you have a successful outing? She looked him up and down. I think so. But it's time for you to dress up for our date. She tossed him a pile of clothing. Put it on. It is wrinkle-resistant and tear-proof. It's the best I could do with such short notice. All she can do now is try to beat you up and ruin your perfect face. As he spoke, a flare of heat fired up around her, and if she dares to touch your face and ruin your looks, my Mikado-sama, I will kill her. Oh ho 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 ho! Exclamation point. Stepping back nervously, Mikado thought it best to please Kodakai at the moment. He didn't think her insanity could go so far as to have her hurt him, but it would be best not to mention the ice skating competition. He hadn't seen the white lily, but he didn't think his wife would approve of his little excursion. He stripped down, conscious of her eyes on him. He smiled to himself as she stopped her laughing to concentrate on watching him. He was in perfect shape, his body trim yet powerful. He needed strength while ice skating with his partner, to dance over the ice and battle with other skating pals. He knew he looked good and was more than happy to have Kodaka watching as he undressed naked. He stood in front of her, tall and sexy. Kodakai's husband, the man of her dreams. The man of a lot of fangirls' dreams. Only Kodakai's dreams came true. He smiled down at her, and slowly slid into the new outfit, one a piece at a time, so she could enjoy watching him. He looked in the mirror at himself, dressed now in blood-red shirt under an ivory three-piece silk suit. He wondered at the fabric choice, if he was to be attacked, but it looked really good on him. In the mirror he saw a flash, and there was Kodakai in her wedding dress. He had not seen her in that since their secret wedding a number of years ago. It was black, a full black skirt and bodice with beautiful black roses here and there. She had on a black veil, though it did not cover her face. Black was her color, even though it was a bit odd that she chose to wear that color for their wedding. Less than but she is the Black Rose, after all. Greater than Mikado-sama, also wear this. She placed a long-stemmed black rose in both the buttonhole on his lapel. If she tries to throw lilies at you, smell the rose. I've put some anti-paralysis powder in a. He wrapped his arms around her and drew her into a long, sweet kiss. She closed her eyes and wrapped her arms around his neck. Mikado's kissed her strongly, then more passionately, and he lifts her off of her feet to carry her out of the room and towards the front door. Susuke, used to the strange behavior of the Kunio family, didn't really notice too much out of the ordinary and opened the front door for a tattoo, and Mikado carried Kodakai past him and outside and heeded, still locked in a passionate kiss as they headed towards the street. Left square bracket somewhere in China, right square bracket too small. Old men ran through a village, with a stampede of angry women chasing them. One held a rather large calligraphy brush, the other held a bag. In their rush to escape the women, the bag opened a little and a few panties fell out, twirled in the air, and fell to the ground before getting trampled under the feet of the angry women. When the women finally managed to catch them, the two ended up feeling the opposite of their names. They were not happy or lucky. Instead, Apause and Rakaiuzai were pained, tired and panty-less. Left square bracket Asuka single quote S mansion right square bracket Yukayu came to and sat up with a start. She did not recognize the place. It was obviously not the Kunyu mansion, though it seemed just as large and as elegant. But it did not seem to be the sort of place where Kodakai and Kunyu would live. While their place was more Japanese in feel, this mansion had a Western feel to it. Grand piano, settees, love chairs, a grandfather clock and even porcelain figurines on the mantelpiece above the fireplace. It was then that she spotted Asuka, sitting on one of the armchairs. She was pretty, with lovely curls of blonde hair and wearing a slim, elegant dress that swept down to her feet. She was holding a single white lily and managed to look the part of a perfect lady. Double quote up. You have awakened, I see. Asuka said. You have the pleasure of seeing Gajoka Sajinoya, the white lily. Since my last date went missing, I have decided that you will be my date for this evening. Oh ho 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 ho! Exclamation point double quote less than are they twins question mark exclamation point greater than Yukayu stared at Asuka. It wasn't that they looked alike, it was just their behavior and the laugh. The laugh. It was insane, the same quality as Kodakai's laugh. Maybe it was something to do with being super rich, or maybe it was just that this girl and Kodakai were both nuts. She quickly gathered her wits, and spoke in a deeper voice. My beautiful goddess, how could I refuse to date you? The voice didn't sound very manly, but it was good enough. Yukayu flashed a smile and did her best trying to act like a bisan, and Asuka smiled, pleased. She mainly had men run away from her for some odd reason, but at least this one was being sensible. She was pretty, and she thought that if she could at least get Mikado trampled in the dust, there would be no way that she would lose to Kodakai. Not with the pretty boy. And no losing by technicalities, either. This one had agreed to date her exclamation point double quote if I know Kodakai. She will play dirty tricks to try to win this dating duel tonight. My suit of armor is unfortunately being polished. So while we date innocently, be careful of that nasty woman's wicked ways. Double quote less than look who's talking about playing dirty tricks exclamation point greater than Yukayu remembered the white lily explosion and nothing else until she had woken. Less than if she is still going to try to do something to Mikado and Kodakai. Greater than left square bracket outside Asuka's mansion right square bracket double quote be very careful of traps, Mikado-sama. She will do whatever she can to mess up your pretty face. We must be careful. Kodakai looked around with suspicion, not sure exactly what Asuka had planned, but she knew that there would be traps. Of course. I will not let anything touch me. I couldn't disappoint you army fans. He trailed off with a sigh, looking skywards. Ah, how it would disappoint so many women should I get but a single scar on my face. Kodakai looked around, and looked to the most likely spots for a trap. Had she been setting up traps for Asuka? Where would she have put them? No Commodon He opened the door Mikado paused, his hand on the front door, below a sign that read "Common, Kodakai and Mikado our double date duel has begun," and looked up. Above him was a bouquet of white lilies, done up to look like a bell. Kodakai pulled a rhythmic gymnastics ball out of thin air and tossed it at the flowers. As Mikado leaped back, the ball hit the flowers and they exploded in a blaze of flash powder. Turning questioningly to Kodakai, Mikado raised an eyebrow. Is this what we can expect on this date of ours? My beloved ? Only until we get to her, Mikado-sama. Then when she sees your face, shall we have to give an ! We shouldn't keep her awaiting, then. This time he turned the door nonchalantly and pushed. Nothing happened now that Kodakai had disarmed the first trap. He pushed again and the front door swung wide open. Left square bracket inside right square bracket. Sitting on the couch, Yukio looked up as Asuka came to sit next to her. The woman even moved with elegance. At the sound of the explosion from the door trap, Asuka just smiled. What was that? Yukio asked. Oh, just a little welcome present to Kodakai and Mikado. She has obviously not lost her edge. It will be interesting to see if they manage to get through the gauntlet without too much damage to her husband. Ho 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 ho! Hack. Can I ask what you plan to do to them? Oh, nothing. It's already all set up. But when they make it here, she gave another laugh, and held out the white lily for Yukio to see. Although I don't wish to mark such a pretty face as Sanzanin Mikado, I may have tossed it to make sure that Kodakai doesn't win! But aren't I pretty enough to win without doing anything more? Yukio flicked a hand through her hair and gave another smile, doing her best to look dishonest. Oh, but you are. I just have to add a little insurance, just in case. They waited in silence for a time, Yukio jumping as every so often there was an explosion. If it was anything like Kodakai's traps, she was sure that the couple would be fine. Kodakai was wily enough to spot them, and if not, she was sure that Mikado was good enough to dodge them. From the corner of her eye, behind Asuka at one of the windows, Yukio noticed movement. She looked without turning her head, using her peripheral vision to look as best she could. At one of the windows she saw Nabiki's face, with Kunio behind her looking bemused. as well as his Yusa, and she repressed a shudder. Sabe said up before she could do much else. The door banged open, and there stood both Kodakai and Mikado, looking somewhat bedraggled but none the worse for wear. Mikado flashed a smile towards Asuka, and suddenly it didn't matter that there was a slight smudge on his suit or that his hair was slightly boosted up. The air around him went all hazy and pink as Mikado's kissing Gattakiora surrounded him, and he advanced on Asuka. Having known Mikado for way too long, Yukaiu managed to ignore the field of charm that surrounded him. She looked to Asuka, who was trying her best to break it, realizing that he had indeed won with that look. She raised her white lily and pointed at Mikado. Kodakai, the lily. Yukaiu called and knocked into Asuka, breaking notably Asuka's concentration with the flower, but Mikado's stunning effect on her without seeming to move. Kodakai threw a volley of rhythmic gymnastic pins at the white lily in Asuka's hand. Surprised, she dropped the flower as the pins hit it, and barreled into Yukaiu, knocking her down to the floor. As the flower and pins bounced on the floor, Asuka gave a relieved sigh and sat up. Kodakai, you should be more careful. That was meant to blow up. You're lucky that it didn't work. Otherwise we'd all be covered in mud. You exclamation point, double quote, oh ho 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 ho. I was hoping that it would just blow up in your face instead, my dear white lily. Kodakai stood over Asuka, in front of Mikado, and stared down smugly at her kindergarten rival. Now you have no more tricks left. Let's see who has the best looking date exclamation point, double quote. Asuka slowly stood up and brushed herself off. As Yukaiu stood, she started to step back, away from the couch, and sidled towards the fallen white lily. Less than if I can get to it, I can still cover him in mud, and we'll win this exclamation point. Greater than. Yukaiu stood up, and brushed herself off, making sure that the tuxedo that she was wearing was still okay. It was Ryuga's, and pretty expensive exclamation point, double quote. Yukaiu, Kodakai and Mikado spoke in unison. Noticing the distraction, Asuka made a quick grab for the lily, only to find it gone. Double quote. Sabine. Azusa was dancing around the room with it, showing it off to what looked to be a police box. Sabine, this is Angelique, and Angelique, this is Sabine exclamation point, double quote. Nabiki and Kunio were also in the room, the window open behind them. This must be my little sister's friend. How beauteous you are. White lily exclamation point, exclamation point, double quote. Yukaiu sweated. Less than no more laughter, please exclamation point. Greater than. Asuka sighed and massaged her temples for a moment. Less than. Where had all these strange people come from? No matter. I will do this like a lady. Greater than. Kodakai pulled Mikado to stand next to Yukaiu, then frowned. Is this her date? White lily question mark, double quote. Yes, isn't he beautiful? I think we need a third party to help decide, now that your husband isn't cheating with that or of his Asuka smiled. It was a much closer battle now. Herbisanen versus the skating god. Of course. HMM. Nabiki came over to inspect both Mikado and Yukayu. She stared at Mikado first, and had to admit that he was pretty cute. Then Soun and looked at Yukayu. With a mock look of horror, Nabiki said softly, "Your date? You can't cheat like this and hope to win, Asuka dear. This is a woman." With that, Nabiki pulled open Yukai's tuxedo and showed her down breasts to the room. Exclamation point! A woman. Asuka looked faint. Another win for me. The Black Rose. You can never defeat me, even if I live to be 100. Kodakai laughed, lording it over the defeated White Lily. Asuka fell to her knees. Suddenly there was an explosion, and everyone turned to see a mud cover at Azusa and Tsubasa. Azusa started to cry. Ranma Nibun no Ichi skin deep epilogue right square bracket Nabiki left Kodakai and Mikado, a smile on her face. Less than well, that was quite Iaku. If nothing else, at least it will keep Kodakai off of my back for quite some time. They know they owe me. Nodded greater than she slipped back into her room, and smiled happily at Kunu, who was on feed, waiting for her. She settled down on the bed next to him and kissed him tenderly. He responded to her kiss, and wrapped his arms around her and pulled her down against him, whispering against her lips, "My beloved goddess." He slowly tugged at her top, loosening it so he could reach the skin underneath. His fingers danced lightly over her stomach, sides and back as they kissed, more passionately. Before long, he began to undress her, drinking in her presence, enjoying the intimacy. Nabiki half closed her eyes and sighed happily into the kiss, her naked form contrasting against the kendo outfit Kunu still wore. After a longer kiss, her hands started to quest around his clothing, undressing him so she could feel him against her own body and share their warmth. Finally free of their clothing, Kunu pulled Nabiki gently towards him, and smells at her. He runs his hands over her breasts, his fingertips sliding up over her throat and chin to stroke her cheek tenderly. "I love you so, my beautiful one." She pressed close against his body, her hands moving and stroking expertly over his body. She knew exactly what pleased him, knowing where to touch, where to kiss, where to stroke. She watched his face with pleasure as she turned him on, smiling as she felt his manhood becoming erect against her body. His own skillful pleasuring of her threatened to scatter her boast, but she held on, gazing into his passion-filled eyes. The room seemed to heat up as they continued their foreplay, both of them becoming warmed, hotter, and their need for each other grew. The passion grew in each of them, and when they could not hold it in anymore, they began to make love, laying next to each other, facing each other on their bed. Kunu positioned himself, and slowly slid his length into Nabiki's tight wet opening. He held onto her hip, pulling her against him as he filled her. She moaned softly, her leg up over his hip, pulling him against each thrust of his hips. Their rhythm started slowly, both of them savoring each and every motion off their bodies as they joined together. Nabiki's breasts pressing against his chest, her hardened nipples rubbed against his skin. His manhood entering her hot wetness fully, pulling back only to enter again, feeling her tightness surrounding him. Their moans started softly, but soon grew louder as their passions rose and their speed quickened. Their passion finally reached a crescendo as they met again and again, faster, holding tightly onto each other. Nabiki reached up and kissed him on the lips, but could not stop a cry of pleasure as she was suddenly pushed over the edge and orgasmed, pleasure flooding her senses. Kissing her back hotly, Kuryu continued to enter her velvety inner walls clenching around his manhood. Knowing her so well, knowing the pleasure he'd given her, he finally let himself go. Moaning into the kiss. He came, his hot seed shooting into her, giving him release and such pleasure. Nabiki felt him slowly relax, and pushed him gently down on his back on the bed. She felt him pull out of her body, and gave a little moan as he brushed her now oversensitive clitoris. She shivered, and smiled at him, "And I love you, too, you know." She closed her eyes and relaxed, her head on her husband's shoulder, an arm mothing to rest over his chest. She felt his hand come to rest on her back as she snuggled against him. She wasn't bored anymore. Outthinking Kodakai's rival had been fun. Plus she had set up a deal with Asuka. She would send her photos of any gorgeous men who happened by, and Asuka would pay for the photos and information on them. Asuka still hopes to beat Kodakai one day. Nabiki doubted that would happen. She tilted her head back and looked up at Kuryu as he lay there, a smile on his face, idly stroking her back. He good looking, but not the most sexy man in the world. He wasn't the smartest, either. She still loved him. Oh, and he loved her. That was what mattered. Less than but one like Asuka. Sure, she's pretty, but she's not the refined and elegant lady she pretends to be. Would Asuka ever find someone greater than Nabiki? Wouldn't want to bet, either way. Less than Kodakai managed to find love, but, well, beauty, after all, is only skin deep. Greater than. She smiled at her beloved, and held him close. They soon fell asleep in each other's arms. I got bored. I reread my fanfics. I wrote this. CNC welcome. Mata exclamation point kun hyphen chan http://www.tkeep.org/tilde kunoid I/kunoid I/fanfics.html